Okay. Only other item of business we have, I understand, Mr. Artru, you would like to address the commission?
I would.
Okay, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. And rather than talk off the cuff, I've got a prepared statement, and I'll let you have a copy of the text after I finish. And my presentation today concerns the comments that were in the Lincoln County Journal this Sunday, and the article that was titled "Colbert County Budget Makes Small Gains." Let me start by saying that I take issue with some of the information that was presented in the news article this week. Some of the information was inaccurate and factually incorrect, and some of it only presented a portion of the county's overall financial picture for 2011. It is not my intent to try and make anyone look bad. However, I believe that it is important that the taxpayers in Lincoln County get the whole picture of the county's financial picture and not just a portion of the picture. That being said, the information that I will present today is based upon the County Treasurer's 2011 annual report that was provided to me on January 18th by the County Clerk's Office in response to a Sunshine Law request. The Treasurer's report is not based upon fund accounting, but is based upon actual deposits into bank accounts and actual checks written from those same accounts. Thus, the report is based upon a cash basis method of accounting rather than fund accounting, on which most of the other counties' financial reports are based. And, as is proper with all accounting analysis, inter-fund transfers, both in and out, were eliminated to get a true picture of the actual and budgeted revenues and expenses. As you know, the county has a total of 54 separate accounts. My analysis included all 54 accounts, and I will break them down as follows. 5 main operating accounts: general revenue, road and bridge, law enforcement trust, assessor, and 911 dispatch. These accounts represent approximately 25% of all county funds. 11 discretionary fund accounts that cover other aspects of the county operations, such as sheriff's office, jail, prosecuting attorney's office, recorder, elections, and shelter care. These accounts represent about 0.5% of all county funds. 38 other funds described as taxing district / pass-through accounts, neighborhood improvement district funds, unbudgeted accounts held in the county treasury, other budgeted items, and unclassified items. These accounts represent about 75% of all county funds. Now, for item number 1, quote, Lincoln County's overall revenue exceeded its expenditures in 2011, unquote. This statement is true for the 5 major operating accounts with a positive revenue flow of over $1.3 million. However, this statement is not true for the discretionary accounts, where those accounts showed a deficit of over $393,000. This statement is also not true for the other accounts, which showed a deficit of over $1.1 million. If you total all 54 of the county's accounts, you get total revenue of over $53.3 million and total expenses of over $53.8 million, a deficit of over $551,000. So, the statement in the newspaper is only partially correct and incorrect when you look at the county as a whole. Item number 2, our income was better than we anticipated. That's quote, unquote. I assume that this statement is measured by comparing actual income versus budgeted income. If that is true, then again the statement is only partially correct. For the 5 major operating accounts, actual revenue was over $13.4 million compared to budgeted revenue of over $14 million, a deficit of over $600,000. For the county's discretionary accounts, actual revenue was over $310,000 against budgeted revenue of over $285,000, a positive amount of over $24,000. When you combine the 2 classes of accounts, major operating accounts and discretionary accounts, you have a revenue deficit of over $586,000 when comparing actual revenue to budgeted revenue. So, the statement in the newspaper is again only partially correct. It is difficult to present an analysis of actual revenue versus budgeted revenue for the other county accounts and look at the county as a whole, since the county did not budget amounts for most of the other accounts. Item 3, quote, "The county offices and staff spent significantly less and came in at or below budget," unquote. When you look at all the 5 major operating accounts and the 11 discretionary accounts, this statement is true except for the shelter care fund, which showed actual expenses exceeding budgeted expenses by $91. The actual amount of expenses for all 16 accounts was over $13.1 million versus a budgeted expense amount of over $14.7 million, a positive budget amount of over $1.6 million. Again, it is difficult to present an analysis of actual expenses versus budgeted expenses for the other county accounts and look at the county as a whole, since the county did not budget amounts for most of the other county accounts. However, I do wish to congratulate the commissioners and the department heads for doing a good job in managing and controlling their expenses for last year. Item 4, the small gain in revenue and their fiscal responsibilities helped us finish in the black, unquote. This is a true statement for the total of all 16 operating and discretionary county accounts, but not for the county as a whole. When you look at the county as a whole, for all 54 accounts, actual expenses were $15.8 million, and that exceeded revenues of $53.3 million by over $551,000. Item 5, 2 budgets, the law enforcement and 911 were areas where the financial aspects were not as good, unquote. I agree with that statement, as the law enforcement trust account had a deficit of over $772,000, and 911 dispatch account had a deficit of over $324,000. However, there were other operating and discretionary accounts that also showed expenses exceeding revenue. The shelter care fund had a deficit of over $2.6 thousand. The recorder user fee account had a deficit of over $74,000, and the jail improvement fund had a deficit of over $399,000. And the other accounts had a combined deficit of over $1.1 million. Item 6. The statement from the paper reads, "In the end, the reserves in general revenue increased by approximately $130,000. Assuming that reserves and fund balances are the same items and represent unspent account monies either from prior and or current years, this statement is not true. A second assumption is that reserves and fund balances do not literally mean investments. The general revenue reserve fund balance increased only $4,341 from 1/1 to 12/31. And during that same period, the general fund investments decreased over $370,000. So when you net the gain in reserve fund balance increases against the decreases in general revenue investments, you get an overall decrease of over $366,000. Item 7. Commissioner Colbert said the surplus in the Road and Bridge Fund grew by over $400,000. This statement is true in that reserve fund balances increased by over $560,000, while investments for Road and Bridge decreased by $112,000. And when netting the decrease in investments against the increase in reserve and fund balances, you have a positive gain of $454,840. Now, my overall assessment of the county's financial condition for the year 2011. Actual revenue for the 16 operating and discretionary accounts did not meet anticipated budget amounts. Actual expenses for the 16 operating and discretionary accounts were less than budgeted. Actual revenue exceeded actual expenses for the total of all 16 operating and discretionary funds. For all 54 county accounts, expenses exceeded revenue by over $551,000. For all 54 county accounts, reserve fund balances increased from 1/1 to 12/31 by over $500,000. For all 54 county accounts, investments decreased from 1/1 to 12/31 by over $884,000, from $4.6 million to $3.7 million. Netting the overall reserve fund balance increases against the decrease in investments, the county lost $383,401 for the year 2011. And this is my main concern, in that the county cannot continue to lose money year after year and still continue on a stable financial footing. At 12/31/11, the county had reserve fund balances totaling over $2.3 million. But, as you know, those funds are not totally unrestricted for use anywhere in the county. As of 12/31/11, the county had unrestricted general revenue investments of over $1.9 million and over $1.8 million in investments restricted to road and bridge and jail improvements. Overall, the county has unrestricted investments and reserve fund balances totaling just over $2.3 million, which is about 4% of the total amount of funds spent by the county last year. As I mentioned previously, my main concern is that we did well controlling expenses, and I would like to see that continue, because I think that's one of the part of the pieces that we need to get to the point where we're not ending up with a deficit every year and reserves and investments continue to trend down, but instead we can add to the reserves accounts and build back some of the investments. Having an unrestricted reserve fund of only 4%, I think, leaves us very much on the low side of where we need to be in case we have some type of emergency here in this county. And those are my comments for today. I've got a packet of information for you, and if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them. I know that's a lot of information to throw at you at any one time, and I would like to reserve some time during the public comment period next week so that I can make some comments regarding the 2012 budget. And if you have questions about the statement, I'd be glad to answer them at that time, or if you want to throw them at me now. Either way is fine with me.
My only couple questions, Tom.
Sure.
There is a big disconnect between you and I as far as the understanding of the transfers go, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
When you discount the amount of the transfer, do you also discount the amount of the expense?
Yes, I do. Let's say, for example, that you take and you transfer $10,000 from the revenue to law enforcement trust. Okay, in my analysis, what I do, the general revenue account doesn't get credit for an expense for the $10,000 that it sends on over to the law enforcement trust. And at the same time, the law enforcement trust doesn't then get to count that as incoming revenue.
Right.
So from a purely accounting standpoint, if you were to include as an expense that item and for general revenue, and include as revenue for the law enforcement trust, basically what you've done is you've artificially inflated your numbers by $10,000, because you're not actually making a deposit of genuine revenue. It's a transfer. And so I eliminate it on both sides, and I attempted to identify all the transfers that I could and get down to what was actually money coming into the bank and then money that was going out of the bank via debits or checks or however they did it. And,
right.
And I think that's where most people in the county can actually relate, because that's, I don't know about most people, but that's how I handle my own personal finances. It's based upon banking information, money into the account, money out of the account. Not saying that, that fund accounting isn't appropriate, because I know there's a requirement to do that. But when you look at the actual money coming in and the actual money going out, it's a little bit different using fund accounting as compared to cash basis method of accounting.
Right. I think we could agree that one of the nuances of our accounting system is, at the end of the day, it overstates both revenue and expenses by the amount of any transfers.
Yes,